The whiskey glass hit the bar with enough force to crack, amber liquid sloshing over the rim and pooling across the dark wood surface. Elena flinched, but kept her expression neutral, her hand already reaching for a towel as she assessed the man slouched on the stool in front of her, red-faced, suit rumpled, wedding ring catching the dim overhead light as he gestured aggressively. "Another?" he slurred, pushing the damaged glass toward her. "And make it a double this time. What, you deaf?" "I think you've had enough for tonight." Elena kept her voice level, professional, even as her pulse kicked up. The bar had emptied out over the past hour, just a handful of regulars nursing drinks in the back booths, and Tony had stepped outside for a smoke break. The timing couldn't have been worse. "I can call you a cab." "I don't need a fucking cab." He lurched forward, his hand shooting out to grab her wrist before she could step back. His grip was hot and damp, fingers digging into her skin hard enough to hurt. "I need another drink, sweetheart. Or are you too good to serve me?" Elena's free hand moved instinctively to her pocket, fingers brushing the small canister of pepper spray she'd started carrying 6 months ago, after the third time a drunk customer had followed her to her car. Her mind raced through options: scream for Tony, try to pull away, spray this asshole and deal with the fallout. The bar's owner would be furious if she caused a scene, but the alternative was letting this man's grip tighten, letting his bloodshot eyes rake over her body like she was something he could purchase along with his whiskey. "Let go of me!" She put steel in her voice, channeling every ounce of her mother's strength, the way Irina Volkov had faced down bill collectors and landlords and men who thought a single mother was easy prey. "Right now!" The front door opened. The change in air pressure was subtle, just a whisper of cool night wind cutting through the bar's stale warmth, but the drunk man's attention snapped toward the entrance. His grip on Elena's wrist loosened fractionally. She followed his gaze and felt her breath catch. The man who'd entered moved like violence contained in an expensive suit. Charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind of clothing that whispered wealth so loudly it didn't need to shout. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair touched with silver at the temples, and when his eyes swept the room, Elena felt the assessment in that gaze, like a physical touch. Those eyes were the color of winter storms, gray and cold and utterly without mercy. They settled on her wrist, still trapped in the drunk man's grip. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You're going to want to let her go." The newcomer's voice was quiet, almost conversational, but something in its timbre made the hair on the back of Elena's neck stand up. He moved closer, each step measured and deliberate, and she noticed now the two men who'd entered, behind him, massive, silent, wearing matching expressions of professional violence, barely leashed. The drunk man had sobered up considerably in the past 30 seconds. His hand jerked away from Elena's wrist like she'd burned him. "Hey man, I was just leaving." The word was flat, final. The newcomer gestured toward the door with one hand, and the drunk man practically fell off his stool in his haste to comply, stumbling toward the exit without looking back. The door swung shut behind him, and silence settled over the bar like settling dust. Elena realized she was rubbing her wrist, trying to erase the feeling of those clammy fingers. She forced herself to stop, to meet the stranger's eyes, even though every instinct screamed at her to look away, to make herself small and unthreatening. Men like this, and she knew what he was, could read it in the deference his guards showed him, in the way he commanded space. Didn't respect fear. They fed on it. "Thank you," she said, and was proud that her voice didn't shake. "But I had it under control." One corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "I'm sure you did." His accent was faint, but unmistakable. Russian, like her mother's had been before years in America, had softened its edges. "Whiskey, neat, whatever you have that isn't bottom shelf." Elena moved on autopilot, reaching for the good bottles kept on the upper shelf. Her hands didn't shake as she poured 2 fingers of 20-year Macallan into a clean glass. When she set it in front of him, he was watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "You work here every night?" He picked up the glass but didn't drink, just held it, studying her over the rim. 5 nights a week. She began wiping down the bar, needing something to do with her hands. Wednesdays and Thursdays off. Late hours for a woman alone? I'm not alone. Tony, the doorman, just stepped out for a smoke. It wasn't exactly a lie, though Tony's smoke breaks had a tendency to stretch into phone conversations with his girlfriend. And I can take care of myself. That's not what it looked like from where I was standing. Irritation flared, hot and sharp. I said thank you. I don't know what else you want from me. His eyes narrowed slightly, reassessing. Your name. Elena. The word was out before she could think better of it. Something about his presence demanded honesty, pulled truth from her like gravity. Elena Volkov. The glass stopped halfway to his lips. The change was subtle, a fractional widening of his eyes, a stillness that went beyond mere lack of motion into something almost predatory. When he finally spoke, his voice had gone rough. Volkov! It wasn't a question, but Elena nodded anyway, unease coiling in her stomach. Yes. Why? He set the glass down carefully, his gaze never leaving her face. She watched him take in her features, the high cheekbones, the dark blonde hair she'd pulled back in a messy bun, the gray-blue eyes that had come from her father's side. Whatever he was searching for, he seemed to find it, because something shifted in his expression, a crack appearing in that controlled facade. Your mother, he said slowly, Irina Volkov, maiden name Sokolov. Elena's blood turned to ice. How do you know? What was her patronymic? I don't. But she did know, had heard it once or twice, when her mother's old friends called, voices heavy with nostalgia and loss. Mikhailovna, Irina Mikhailovna Sokolov. She died 3 years ago. The words came out defensive, sharp with old grief. Who are you? How did you know her? He reached for his whiskey, downed it in one smooth motion, and when he set the glass back on the bar, his hand wasn't quite steady. Dmitri Morozov. The name landed between them like a stone into still water. I knew your mother a long time ago, before she came to America. The name meant nothing to Elena, but the way he said it, with weight, with history, made her heart race. She'd spent years piecing together fragments of her mother's past, trying to understand the woman who'd fled Russia with nothing but a suitcase and a 2-year-old daughter, who'd worked 3 jobs to keep them fed and housed, who'd never spoken about family or friends left behind. Irina had built a wall around her past, brick by careful brick, and Elena had learned early not to ask questions that would only be met with silence. Now here was a man who claimed to have known that past, to have been part of it. My mother never mentioned you. Elena heard the doubt in her own voice. No. Something that might have been pain flickered across his features. She wouldn't have. Elena's hand moved to the necklace she always wore, a delicate gold chain with a small locket, one of the few pieces of jewelry her mother had owned, passed to Elena in the weeks before Irina's death. She'd never opened it, had been afraid of what she might find inside, but now her fingers found the tiny clasp, working it open with shaking hands. Inside were 2 photographs, so small she had to hold the locket up to the light to make them out clearly. On one side, a picture of Elena as a baby, chubby-cheeked and laughing. On the other, she lifted her eyes to Dmitri Morozov and saw him staring at the locket with an expression of such raw anguish it stole her breath. The photograph was old, faded, the colors slightly washed out, but the subject was unmistakable. A young man with dark hair and gray eyes, smiling at the camera with an openness that seemed impossible for the controlled, dangerous man sitting across from her now. This was my mother's, Elena said quietly, and watched him close his eyes like he'd been struck. She wore it every day until the cancer had left her too weak to fasten the clasp, until Elena had slipped it off her mother's neck and put it on her own. a talisman against the grief that was coming. She never told me who you were, just that the locket was important, that I should keep it safe. When Dmitri opened his eyes, they were bright with unshed tears. He made no move to hide it, this glimpse of humanity beneath the armor. She left Russia because of me, he said, and his voice had gone hoarse. Because of what I was, what I did. She was pregnant, with you, and I told her to run, that my world would destroy her, destroy any chance our child had at a normal life. He drew a shaking breath. I never saw her again. Never knew if she made it safely, if you— He stopped, his jaw working. I looked for years. She covered her tracks too well. Elena felt the world tilt sideways. The bar, with its scarred wood and sticky floors, and the smell of stale beer, suddenly seemed unreal. You're my father. No. The word was immediate, firm. Your father was a good man who raised you, who gave you his name. He paused, searching for the right description. I'm a ghost from your mother's past. A mistake she was smart enough to run from. Then why are you here? Elena demanded. Why this bar tonight? Why? Coincidence. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Or fate. I don't know anymore. I own properties in this neighborhood, was checking on them, saw the light on, decided I wanted a drink. I had no idea. He stopped, his gaze dropping to the locket still clutched in her hand. May I? She should say no. Should snap the locket closed and tell him to leave, to take his revelations and his dangerous eyes and his impossible claim and get out of her life. But she found herself holding it out instead, watching as he took it with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything else about him. He stared at the photograph for a long time, his thumb tracing the worn metal edge of the locket. I was 24 when this was taken, he said finally. She was 22. We'd known each other since childhood, but that summer? His voice caught. I was already deep in the life by then. Bratva. You know what that means? Russian Mafia. Elena had heard the term before, in whispered conversations between her mother's few Russian acquaintances, always with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. Yes, I'd inherited my father's position, his responsibilities, his enemies. Dmitri's fingers tightened on the locket. Irina was everything good I'd ever known. Pure, untouched by the violence. When I found out she was pregnant, I knew I had two choices. Bring her deeper into my world and watch it corrupt her. Watch her learn to be afraid every time I left the house. Watch our child grow up surrounded by guns and blood and lies. Or let her go. He looked up, meeting Elena's eyes. I chose to let her go. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, and I've done terrible things. The confession hung between them, heavy and raw. Elena's mind reeled, trying to reconcile this story with everything she'd known about her mother. The quiet strength, the fierce independence, the way she'd built a life from nothing. Had she loved this man? Had she resented him for sending her away? Or had she been grateful for the escape? She never spoke about you, Elena said again, softer this time. Not once. I used to wonder. I had a stepfather for a few years when I was little, before he left. I thought maybe he was the one in the photograph, but she never confirmed it, never denied it. Just wore the locket and looked sad sometimes. She was protecting you. Dmitri handed the locket back carefully, like it was something precious and fragile. From me, from my world, she was right to do it. He stood, pulling out his wallet and laying several bills on the bar, far more than the drink cost. I should go. I'm sorry for— He gestured vaguely, encompassing the entire surreal conversation. For disrupting your night, for existing. Wait! The word burst from Elena before she could stop it. Dmitri paused, his expression unreadable. That's it? You tell me you're the reason my mother fled her entire life, that you're my biological father, and then you leave? What would you have me do? He asked the question gently, like he was genuinely curious. I can't undo the past. I can't bring her back. All I can do is respect her wishes and stay away from you. Maybe I don't want you to stay away. Elena surprised herself with the words, with the vehemence behind them. She'd spent so many years with questions, with holes in her history that her mother had refused to fill. Now here was someone who could answer them, who held pieces of the puzzle she'd been trying to solve since she was old enough to wonder why they were alone, why her mother looked over her shoulder in crowded places, why they'd moved 3 times before Elena started school. Maybe I want to know who you are, who she was, before America, before me. Dmitri studied her for a long moment, something like respect warming his cold eyes. You're like her, he said finally. She never backed down either, even when she should have. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a card. Plain white, embossed with a phone number and nothing else. If you want answers, call me. But understand, Elena, my world hasn't changed since your mother ran from it. It's still violent, still dangerous. Getting close to me puts a target on your back. I'll take my chances. She took the card, feeling the heavy weight of the paper stock, the quality that spoke of wealth and power. Then call me tomorrow. He moved toward the door, his guards falling into step behind him. And Elena, get a better security system for this place. Somewhere your mother's daughter works shouldn't have such easy access. Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him, and Elena was left standing in the empty bar, with a locket in one hand and a business card in the other, her entire understanding of her history shattered and reformed into something new and terrifying and impossibly compelling. She looked down at the photograph again, at the young man with open features and hope in his eyes, at the ghost of who Dmitri Morozov had been before life had hardened him into something dangerous and lethal. Then she looked at the other side of the locket, at her own baby picture, and wondered what her mother had thought every time she'd opened it, if she'd mourned the choice she'd made, or if she'd been grateful for the peace that distance had bought. The door burst open, and Tony rushed in, out of breath and apologetic. Sorry, boss called. Had to take it. He stopped, taking in Elena's expression. You okay? Did something happen? Elena closed the locket with a soft click and fastened it back around her neck. Nothing I couldn't handle, she said, and started clearing away the empty glasses, her mind already racing ahead to tomorrow, to the phone call she knew she was going to make, despite every rational warning voice in her head. Because she was her mother's daughter, and if Irina had taught her anything, it was that running from the truth only postponed the inevitable reckoning. The phone number on the card rang twice before a woman's crisp voice answered. Mr. Morozov's office. Elena had spent the entire morning talking herself in and out of making this call, rehearsing what she'd say, trying to convince herself this was a terrible idea. She'd gotten exactly 3 hours of sleep, her dreams full of her mother's face and gray eyes that held winter storms. This is Elena Volkov, she managed. Mr. Morozov said to call. A pause, brief but weighted. 1 moment, please. The hold music was classical, something Russian that Elena didn't recognize. She paced her tiny apartment, weaving between the second-hand furniture and stacks of textbooks. She'd been taking night classes when she could afford them, chipping away at a degree in social work 1 semester at a time. The walls were thin enough that she could hear her neighbor's television, a constant background hum that had become white noise over the past 2 years of living here. The music cut off. Elena! Dmitri's voice was warmer than it had been last night, less guarded. I wasn't sure you'd call. I wasn't sure either. She stopped pacing, staring out the window at the street below. Afternoon sun beating down on cracked pavement. A homeless man pushing a shopping cart, cars honking in endless impatient symphony. But I have questions. I imagined you would. Can you meet me this evening? There's a restaurant I own, quiet, private. We can talk without interruption. Alarm bells rang in Elena's head. Meeting a man she didn't know, Mafia or not, in a private location, was asking for trouble. But then again, if Dmitri Morozov wanted to hurt her, He could have done it last night. Could probably do it any time he wanted, with his resources and his ruthless reputation. She was choosing to trust him, which was either brave or incredibly stupid. "Text me the address," she said. "What time?" 7. And Elena? Come alone. The line went dead before she could respond. The restaurant was in a part of the city Elena rarely ventured into, where the buildings were older and more elegant, where doormen stood at attention and people walked small, perfectly groomed dogs that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She felt conspicuous in her best dress, a simple black sheath she'd bought for her mother's funeral and hadn't worn since, as she approached the entrance to Oblako. A man in a suit that screamed security opened the door for her, his eyes scanning her quickly before he stepped aside. "Ms. Volkov, Mr. Morozov is expecting you." The interior was all dark wood and soft lighting, white tablecloths, and the quiet murmur of expensive conversations. A hostess led her through the main dining room and up a curved staircase to a private room where Dmitri sat alone at a table set for two, a bottle of wine already breathing beside two glasses. He stood when she entered, and she was struck again by the contained power in his movement, the way he occupied space like he owned it, which, she supposed, he literally did. "Elena, thank you for coming." "You say that like I had a choice." She took the seat he pulled out for her, hyper-aware of how close he was, the faint scent of expensive cologne, and something else, something that might have been gun oil. "Your message was pretty clear." "A precaution." He sat across from her, pouring wine into both glasses with practiced ease. "What I'm going to tell you, it's dangerous information. The fewer people who hear it, the better." "You're talking about my mother." Elena left the wine untouched, her hands folded in her lap to keep them from shaking. "About your past with her. What's so dangerous about history?" "Everything, when that history involves the Bratva." Dmitri leaned back, his gray eyes never leaving her face. "Your mother was the daughter of a high-ranking member of a rival organization. Our families had been enemies for generations. Blood feuds, territorial disputes, the usual." His mouth twisted. "We met at a neutral gathering, some attempt at peace talks that went nowhere. I was supposed to hate her on principle. Instead—" He stopped, something vulnerable flickering across his expression. "Instead, I fell in love with her. Completely, stupidly." Elena's chest tightened. She'd imagined many scenarios for her mother's past, but never a Romeo and Juliet story played out against the backdrop of organized crime. "She loved you too?" She said she did. The words came out rough. "For a while we tried to make it work. Secret meetings, stolen time. We told ourselves love was enough, that we could bridge the divide between our families. Then she got pregnant with you, and reality crashed down. Her father found out about us, about the baby. He gave her an ultimatum. End it, end me, or be cast out of the family completely. Cut off from everything and everyone she'd ever known. And you told her to run." Elena could see how the pieces fit together now. The terrible logic of it. "I did more than that. I helped her disappear. False documents, money, contacts in America, who could set her up with a new identity. I made sure she'd be safe, that you'd be safe." Dimitri's hands clenched into fists on the table. "And I made sure her father believed she'd died. Staged an accident, paid off officials, created a grave for people to mourn at. It was the only way to ensure he'd stop looking for her, stop trying to bring her back, or punish her for betraying the family." The weight of that sacrifice, of Irina's choice to leave everything behind, to let her family believe her dead, settled over Elena like a shroud. "She never told me any of this. I knew she'd left Russia, but I thought maybe it was political or economic, not for love, not for me." Dmitri drank his wine in one long swallow. "I don't blame her for not telling you. How do you explain to a child that you chose their life over your own family? That you loved someone enough to become a ghost?" Elena finally reached for her own glass, needing something to do with her hands. The wine was excellent, smooth and complex, wasted on her distracted palate. Why are you telling me this now? What changed? You. He said it simply, like it was obvious. For 26 years, I believed I'd done the right thing, convinced myself that Irina and our child, that you, were living a good life somewhere safe, far from the violence. Then, last night, I walked into a bar and found you serving drinks to drunks, living alone in a neighborhood that's not safe, working yourself to exhaustion. His voice hardened. That's not the life I sacrificed everything to give you. Anger flared, hot and defensive. My life is just fine, thank you. My mother and I. She stopped, grief catching in her throat. We did okay. She worked hard to give me opportunities. I'm getting my degree. I have plans. I'm not criticizing her. Dmitri's tone gentled. Irina did an incredible job with nothing, but she's gone now, and you're alone, and I. He paused, something uncertain entering his expression for the first time. I'd like to help, if you'll let me. Help how? Suspicion crept in. I don't need money. Everyone needs money, but that's not what I'm offering. He leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on her. I'm offering protection, resources, a way out of that job that puts you in danger every night. I can't undo the past, can't bring your mother back, or give you the childhood you deserved. But I can make sure the rest of your life is secure. It was too much, too fast. Elena's head spun with the implications. In exchange for what? Nothing. He seemed almost offended by the question. Elena, you're my daughter. Biology or not, legal recognition or not, you're mine. I've spent 26 years wondering if you were safe, if you were happy, if you looked like your mother. Now I know, and I'm not walking away again. You can't just, Elena struggled to find words. You can't just show up after a lifetime and decide you're going to be my father now. It doesn't work that way. I know. His shoulders dropped slightly, the first sign of defeat she'd seen in him. But I'm asking anyway. Let me be part of your life. Let me know you. I'm not trying to replace anything or anyone. He drew a breath. I just want a chance. Elena stared at him, this dangerous stranger who claimed to have loved her mother enough to let her go, who'd walked away from his own child to keep her safe. Everything in her rational mind screamed that this was a terrible idea, that getting involved with someone like Dmitri Morozov would only bring danger and complications. But another part of her, the part that had always felt incomplete, that had mourned the father-shaped hole in her life, wanted desperately to say yes. One dinner, she said finally. This dinner. You tell me about my mother, the real her, not the version she became in America. And then I'll decide if I want more. Relief washed over his features, profound and unguarded. Deal. They talked for hours. Dmitri told her about Irina before the weight of the world had settled on her shoulders, about a girl who loved poetry and long walks, who'd wanted to be a teacher, who'd laughed easily and often. He told her about secret meetings in gardens and on rooftops, about the way Irina had looked when she'd told him about the pregnancy, equal parts terrified and radiant. He told her about the last time he'd seen her, at the airport, pressing a bundle of cash and documents into her hands, while they both pretended not to cry. In return, Elena told him about the mother she'd known, the fierce protector who'd worked 3 jobs without complaint, who'd helped with homework at midnight after her shift ended, who'd never missed a school play or parent-teacher conference. She told him about Irina's slow decline, the cancer that had stolen her piece by piece, the way she'd gripped Elena's hand in those final days and made her promise to live fully, to not let fear dictate her choices. She never remarried? Dmitri asked quietly. She dated sometimes, never seriously. She said she'd already had her great love. Elena looked down at her empty plate. She'd eaten without tasting, too absorbed in the conversation. I always wondered what she meant. If it was my stepfather or someone else, now I know. I never married either. The admission seemed to cost him something. Couldn't. Everyone I looked at, I compared to her. They all fell short. The intimacy of the confession made Elena's chest ache. She could see it so clearly now. Two people torn apart by circumstances, spending decades alone because they'd loved too deeply to settle for anything less. It was tragic and beautiful, and fundamentally unfair. What happens now? Elena asked, because they couldn't sit here forever, couldn't exist in this bubble of shared history. Now I take you home, Dmitri, signaled for the check, though Elena suspected it was just for show. He owned the restaurant, after all. And I give you my number, my real number, not the office line. You call if you need anything, anything at all, and maybe— He paused, uncertainty flickering again. Maybe we do this again, talk, get to know each other if you want. I'll think about it, Elena said, but they both knew she'd already decided. The car he'd arranged was a sleek black sedan with privacy glass and a silent driver. Elena gave her address reluctantly, hyper-aware of how shabby her neighborhood would seem compared to the restaurant, to his world of wealth and power. But Dmitri made no comment when they pulled up to her building, just walked her to the door like this was a normal evening, a normal goodbye. Thank you, Elena said, and meant it. For telling me about her, about everything. Thank you for listening. He hesitated, then reached out to touch her shoulder, a brief, gentle contact that somehow conveyed years of longing. Be safe, Elena, and call me, please. She watched him walk back to the car, watched it pull away into the night, then climbed the stairs to her apartment, feeling like she'd stepped through a doorway into an entirely different life. She didn't know yet if that was a good thing or a disaster waiting to happen. But as she got ready for bed, as she opened the locket one more time to look at the photographs inside, she realized it didn't matter. The choice had already been made, the instant she'd shown Dmitri that photograph and watched him break open with remembered love. She was her mother's daughter, and like Irina before her, she was choosing to leap into the unknown with hope in her heart and fear at her heels. The only question now was where she'd land. 2 weeks passed in a strange new rhythm. Elena kept working at the bar. She needed the money, and Dmitri had been clear he wouldn't force help on her. But now his people were always somewhere nearby. She'd spot them on her walk to work, sitting in cars or loitering on street corners, and at first it had made her nervous, this constant surveillance. But then a drunk customer got aggressive again, and before she could even reach for her pepper spray, 2 of Dmitri's men were there, calmly escorting the man outside with a level of professional menace that made it clear he wouldn't be coming back. After that, she'd started to feel grateful for the protection, even if it was still unnerving. Dmitri called every few days, never pushy, just checking in. They'd met for coffee twice, for lunch once, always in public places where Elena felt safe. He answered her questions about his work with surprising honesty. Yes, his business involved illegal activities. Yes, people had died because of decisions he'd made. No, he didn't enjoy the violence, but he didn't shy away from it either. It was refreshing, in a twisted way, to talk to someone who didn't hide behind platitudes or excuses. And slowly, cautiously, Elena found herself looking forward to their conversations. Found herself wondering what he'd think about something she'd read, or wanting to tell him about her day. It felt dangerous, this growing attachment, but also inevitable. Like a river finding its path through rock, wearing down resistance over time. Then Victor appeared. Elena had just finished her shift and was walking to her car, a beat-up Honda that spent as much time in the shop as on the road, when she noticed the man leaning against the driver's side door. Early 40s, expensive suit slightly rumpled, with the kind of face that might have been handsome if it wasn't twisted with something mean. Elena Volkov? His accent was thick, unmistakably Russian. We need to talk. Every instinct screamed danger. Elena looked around for Dmitri's guards, but the street was empty, the usual watching presence nowhere to be seen. Her hand moved to her phone. I don't know you, but I know you. He pushed off the car, moving closer. Daughter of Irina Sokolov, or should I say, granddaughter of Mikhail Sokolov. Your grandfather is a very important man back home. Important enough that when word reached him that his daughter might not be as dead as he believed, he sent me to investigate. Elena's blood turned to ice. My mother is dead. She died 3 years ago. Yes, I know. Cancer, wasn't it? Terrible way to go? His sympathy was mocking, cruel. But you're alive, and you're the last of Mikhail Sokolov's bloodline. He's getting old, you see. His health is failing. He wants to meet his granddaughter before he dies, wants to bring you home. Russia isn't my home. Elena's hand closed around her phone. America is. I'm not going anywhere with you. That's disappointing. Victor's expression hardened. But predictable. Your mother was stubborn too. Of course, we have ways of encouraging cooperation. Your apartment, for instance, 3rd floor, apartment 3B. You live alone, no security system, very easy to access. The threat was clear, brutal in its simplicity. Elena's finger found the phone's emergency button, but before she could press it, Victor's hand shot out and wrenched the device from her grip, throwing it to the ground where it shattered against the pavement. None of that. He grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. You're coming with me, quietly, and we're going to have a longer conversation. About your grandfather's offer. About what happens to disobedient granddaughters. About, let her go. The voice came from behind Victor, cold and lethal and absolutely terrifying in its calm. Elena looked past her captor and felt relief flood through her like physical warmth. Dmitri stood 10 feet away, and he wasn't alone. 4 men flanked him, all armed, all wearing expressions that promised violence. Victor's grip loosened fractionally. Morozov, this doesn't concern you. You're touching my daughter. That makes it very much my concern. Dmitri moved closer, each step measured, and deadly. You have 3 seconds to release her, before I have my men put a bullet in each of your kneecaps. Mikhail Sokolov wants his granddaughter returned to Russia. Victor was trying to sound confident, but Elena could feel the tension in his hold, the fear creeping in. This is family business. Elena is my family. Dmitri's eyes had gone flat, empty of everything except cold purpose. Her mother was mine. That makes Elena untouchable. If Mikhail has a problem with that, he can take it up with me directly. But he won't get the chance, because you're going to walk away right now and deliver a message for me. He moved suddenly, impossibly fast for a man his size, and Victor was stumbling backward as Dmitri pulled Elena to safety behind him. She found herself surrounded by his guards, human shields between her and danger, while Dmitri faced Victor alone. Tell Mikhail Sokolov that Irina's daughter is under my protection, Dmitri said, his voice carrying in the quiet night. Tell him that any attempt to contact her, threaten her, or remove her from this country will be considered an act of war. And tell him that I've been waiting 26 years for an excuse to destroy him. He tries to take Elena, and I'll have that excuse. Victor stared at him, calculation and fear warring in his expression. Finally, he took a step back. He won't accept this. Then he'll die with his mistake. Dmitri smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Elena had ever seen. Now get the fuck out of my city! Victor left, practically running, and as soon as he was out of sight, Dmitri turned to Elena. The cold mask shattered, replaced by concern so intense it took her breath away. Are you hurt? Did he? I'm fine. Her voice shook. Just scared. He pulled her into his arms without asking permission, and Elena went willingly, burrowing into his chest as delayed shock hit, and her legs started to tremble. He was solid, warm, smelling of cologne and determination, and for the first time since her mother died, Elena felt truly protected. I'm sorry, he murmured into her hair. I should have had more people watching you. Should have anticipated that word might reach Mikhail. This is my fault. It's not. It is. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hands gentle on her shoulders. This is what I was afraid of. What your mother ran from. You're connected to me now, which makes you a target. For Mikhail, for my enemies, for anyone who wants leverage against me. Then I'll be more careful. Elena straightened, forcing strength into her spine. I'll get a security system, pepper spray. No. The word was flat, final. You're not going back to that apartment. You're not working late shifts at a bar where any drunk can threaten you. You're moving somewhere safe, somewhere I can protect you properly. Pride and practicality warred in Elena's chest. I can't just abandon my life. You can if your life is going to get you killed, he softened his tone, some of the command leaving it. Elena, please, I've lost you once already, lost 26 years of watching you grow up. I can't. His voice cracked. I can't lose you for real, not when I just found you. It was the rawness in his admission that broke through her resistance. Because he was right, staying in her apartment, going back to her old routine, was inviting danger. And she didn't want to die, didn't want to become another tragedy in the endless cycle of violence that seemed to orbit around her family. Okay, she whispered, but I still need to work. I have tuition, bills. I'll handle it. He was already pulling out his phone, firing off texts with one hand while keeping the other on her shoulder. You'll stay in one of my properties. Secure building, guards, everything you need, and you'll work for me. I own several legitimate businesses that could use someone with your skills. Better pay, safer environment, and you'll still be building toward your degree. It was happening too fast, her entire life rearranging in the space of minutes, but Elena found she didn't have the energy to fight it. What skills? I'm a bartender taking night classes. You're a survivor. Dmitri met her eyes, and she saw pride there, genuine respect. You're intelligent, determined, capable of facing down drunk assholes and Russian mobsters with equal composure. Trust me, I can find a use for those skills. Despite everything, despite the fear still coursing through her veins, Elena laughed. You're insane. Probably. He smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger, more like the photograph in her locket. But I'm your insanity now, for better or worse. The car arrived, a different one, larger and more heavily armored. Dmitri ushered her inside, his body between her and the street, a physical barrier against any threat. As they pulled away from her old life, Elena looked back once at the shabby building that had been her home for 2 years. Any regrets? Dmitri asked quietly. Elena touched the locket at her throat, feeling the weight of her mother's choices, her sacrifices, her love. Irina had run from this world to protect her daughter, had spent her life keeping Elena safe from the violence and danger. But now that danger had found her anyway, and the man Irina had loved, the man who was, in all the ways that mattered, Elena's father, was offering the only real protection available. No, she said and meant it. No regrets. Just hope, fierce and fragile, that somewhere in this tangled mess of past and present, she might find something like family, like home. The apartment Dmitri brought her to was in one of the most expensive buildings in the city, the kind of place Elena had walked past 1,000 times without imagining she'd ever step inside. The lobby was all marble and modern art, with a doorman who greeted Dmitri by name and pretended not to notice Elena's work clothes and disheveled appearance. They rode the elevator to the penthouse floor in silence, Dmitri's guards following at a discreet distance. The apartment itself was enormous. 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a kitchen with gleaming appliances Elena didn't recognize, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city lights. It was beautiful and impersonal, clearly a property kept for guests rather than lived in, but Elena could already imagine making it hers. Books on those empty shelves, plants in the sunny window alcoves, Her mother's few possessions given place of honor. "It's too much," she said automatically. "It's secure." Dmitri moved through the space, checking locks, closing blinds. 24-hour security downstairs, camera monitoring, reinforced windows. No one gets in who isn't supposed to be here. "I meant it's too expensive. I can't afford—" "You're not paying for it." He turned to face her, his expression brooking no argument. "Elena, this is not negotiable. Your safety is not something you buy on a bartender's salary. This is me, taking care of my daughter. Let me do this." The word daughter still sent a strange thrill through her. She'd spent so long being alone, being the one responsible for everything, that accepting help felt almost like weakness. But she was tired, bone-tired, heart-tired, and the apartment was warm and safe, and Dmitri was looking at her with such fierce protectiveness that arguing felt impossible. "Okay," she said again, and watched relief wash over him. "Thank you." "Don't thank me." He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. "This is the bare minimum of what I should have been doing all along. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll talk about work options and get you properly settled. And Elena?" He met her eyes. "I meant what I said to Victor. You're under my protection now. Anyone who tries to hurt you will answer to me." It should have been terrifying, that promise of violence. Instead, Elena felt safe for the first time in years. After he left, she explored the apartment properly, opening closets to find them stocked with basics: linens, toiletries, even some clothes in approximately her size. Someone had thought ahead, had made sure she'd have everything she needed. It was overwhelming and touching in equal measure. She stood at the window for a long time, looking out at the city sprawling below. Somewhere out there was her old apartment, her old job, her old life. Small and struggling, but hers. She'd built it from nothing, the way her mother had taught her. And now she was letting it go, trading independence for protection, solitude for family. Irina would have been horrified. Or maybe she would have understood. Maybe she would have been relieved that Elena wouldn't have to struggle alone anymore, that the man she'd loved had finally found their daughter and was keeping her safe. Elena touched the locket one more time, tracing the worn metal. "I hope I'm doing the right thing, Mom," she whispered to the empty room. "I hope you'd understand." The locket warmed against her skin, and whether it was her imagination or something more, Elena felt a whisper of approval, of love that transcended death and distance. Her mother had spent her life running from Dmitri Morozov's world, but she'd also loved him enough to keep his photograph close to her heart for 26 years. Maybe that meant something. Maybe it meant Elena was exactly where she was supposed to be. She went to bed in the soft sheets that smelled like lavender, in the apartment high above the dangerous streets, and for the first time since her mother's death, she slept through the night without nightmares. In the morning, she'd face whatever came next. But for now, she was safe, protected, and no longer alone. It was enough. More than enough. It was everything.